The train screeched as it cut through the Texas plains, each turn of its iron wheels groaning like a beast that had been forced too far from home. Inside the dimly lit car, rows of women sat shoulder to shoulder, tired, silent, and bracing for whatever waited outside. They were the last remnants of a broken empire, German auxiliaries, typists, and nurses now labelled prisoners of war. Anna Müller pressed her palm against the cracked windowpane. Beyond the glass stretched a landscape so vast it seemed to mock the idea of fences. Endless grass, light rolling over the horizon, the sun burning low like a forge. She thought of Hamburg's smoke and rubble, of sirens that used to slice the night. Here the only sound was the wind moving through prairie grass. She could almost imagine that the war had ended on another planet. The car jolted and slowed. Someone near the back began to whisper prayers in German. Another woman clutched a rosary that no one dared admit she had kept hidden through every checkpoint. The rumor had followed them across the Atlantic. Texas camps were rough. Cowboys guarded them. Most of the women didn't even know what a cowboy really was, only what American magazines had shown before the war, men with guns and cigarettes and hard, expressionless faces. Metal screamed against metal as the train stopped. The doors opened to a wall of sunlight so blinding that everyone shielded their eyes. Heat rushed in, thick and dry. For a moment there was only the shimmer of air and the creak of the rails cooling in the sun. Then came the unmistakable sound of hooves. They looked up. Out of the haze rode men on horseback, broad hats, dust-coated shirts, belts with heavy buckles that gleamed in the light. The horses tossed their heads, snorting, their shadows stretching long across the platform. To the women they looked like something from a picture book, half real, half me. "It's cowboys!" someone whispered, half in fear, half in awe. The lead rider swung down from his saddle. His boots hit the platform with a hollow thud. He was tall, sunburned, a streak of grey at his temple. He carried no rifle, only a lariat coiled at his side. When he spoke, his voice carried that slow musical accent they had heard in Hollywood reels. "Welcome to Hereford Camp, ladies," he said. "We'll get you settled." The translator, a nervous corporal with round spectacles, hurried to repeat the words in German. But the meaning had already reached them. Welcome, not orders, not silence. Anna clutched her satchel tighter. Her stomach twisted with a fear she couldn't explain. This is the trick, she thought. They lower your guard, then you see their real face. She'd seen soldiers pretend kindness before the interrogation started. Yet nothing cruel followed. The women were guided off the train by local ranch hands wearing army-issue badges pinned awkwardly on plaid shirts. The air smelled of horses and dust and something sweet, mesquite or hay maybe. The fences around the camp were low, the wire loose, more symbolic than secure. As they walked, one of the cowboys tipped his hat toward them. "You'll find supper in the mess hall before sundown." No shouts, no rifles aimed at their backs. Just that easy drawl and the faint jingle of spurs. When the sun slipped lower, the heat eased. They were shown to long wooden cabins built from rough pine, not barracks but something like summer lodges. Inside were bunks lined with clean sheets, and on each pillow a folded towel. The women stood frozen, afraid to touch anything. Lotta Krause, who had once been a secretary in Bremen, whispered, "They think we're guests?" Anna didn't answer. She walked to the window and looked out. Beyond the fence, the cowboys were unhitching their horses, laughing quietly among themselves. The sight unsettled her. After years of orders and explosions, laughter felt alien. Dinner was stew and cornbread, simple but rich enough to make the women eat in silence until the bowls were empty. The guards, if that was even the right word, sat at another table, speaking in low tones. One of them caught Anna's eye and nodded politely, as if to say, "Eat, you're safe here." That night, Anna lay awake listening to the sounds of the camp, the low hum of crickets, the wind scraping across the plain, the distant rhythm of boots on wood. It felt like a dream that could collapse at any moment. She was sure that come morning the illusion would vanish and the cruelty would begin again. But morning came, and the illusion held. A trumpet of hooves echoed outside. The women crowded near the windows. The cowboys were already at work, driving a group of mustangs into a corral. Dust rose around them, glowing gold in the sunrise. The riders moved as one, fluid, confident, almost careless in their mastery. The horses kicked and wheeled, muscles rippling under sunburned hides, but the men guided them with nothing more than a whistle and a flick of rope. For a long while no one spoke. Even fear forgot to breathe. Anna felt something tighten in her chest, a feeling she didn't recognize. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't envy. It was the shock of seeing men who weren't at war. She had seen uniforms all her adult life, but never this. Freedom moving through dust and sunlight, a rhythm older than nations. When one of the horses broke from the corral, a cowboy turned his mount and gave chase. He caught the runaway by its mane, twisting his reins and leaning low. For a heartbeat, both horse and rider vanished in a cloud of gold dust. When it cleared, he was standing beside the animal, calm, one hand on its neck. The German women gasped softly. It was like watching someone tame chaos with gentleness. The cowboy, his name was Tom Whitaker, though they would learn that later, looked toward them and smiled. It wasn't arrogance. It was the smile of a man who didn't understand. Fear. That night, when the women gathered in the cabin, they couldn't stop talking. "They live with horses the way we live with fear," Lotta said. "How can men like that be gods?" "Because," Anna replied quietly, "they don't see us as prisoners." The others stared at her. It was a dangerous thing to believe, that an enemy could see you as human. But over the next few days, evidence piled up. The women were given work, but not punishment. Kitchen duty, laundry, helping with crops that grew in the red Texas soil. The cowboys taught them how to handle rope, how to feed the horses. When they laughed, it wasn't mockery. It was the kind of laughter that belonged to open skies and hard days. One afternoon, Anna was carrying a pail of water when a horse startled nearby. She flinched, expecting a shout, maybe a slap for spilling. Instead, Tom Whitaker was there, catching the bucket before it fell. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. The word Mom, small, respectful, hit harder than any insult she had heard in years. I am fine," she said haltingly in English. He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and walked away. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the scene in her head, the calm tone, the distance in his eyes, the absence of threat. For the first time since capture, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe the rest of her life would not be built from fear. But the mind of a prisoner is trained to expect change, and the war had taught her that kindness could vanish without warning. She told herself not to trust it, not yet. Still, as the camp lights flickered off and the wind sighed across the prairie, Anna heard the distant whinny of horses and the faint laughter of men who rode under stars instead of searchlights. She pressed her forehead to the window pane, the glass cool against her skin, and thought, maybe freedom isn't a country. Maybe it's a kind of heart. Outside, the cowboys were finishing their rounds, silhouettes moving slowly against the horizon. The sky was a sweep of indigo, wide enough to hold every silence she'd ever known. Tomorrow, they would learn that later, looked toward them and smiled. It wasn't arrogance. It was the smile of a man who didn't understand fear. That night, when the women gathered in the cabin, they couldn't stop talking. "They live with horses the way we live with fear," Lotta said. "How can men like that be guards?" "Because," Anna replied quietly, "they don't see us as prisoners." The others stared at her. It was a dangerous thing to believe, that an enemy could see you as human. But over the next few days, evidence piled up. The women were given work, but not punishment. Kitchen duty, laundry, helping with crops that grew in the red Texas soil. The cowboys taught them how to handle rope, how to feed the horses. When they laughed, it wasn't mockery. It was the kind of laughter that belonged to open skies and hard days. One afternoon, Anna was carrying a pail of water when a horse startled nearby. She flinched, expecting a shout, maybe a slap for spilling. Instead, Tom Whitaker was there, catching the bucket before it fell. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. The word ma'am, small, respectful, hit harder than any insult she had heard in years. I am fine," she said haltingly in English. He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and walked away. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the scene in her head, the calm tone, the distance in his eyes, the absence of threat. For the first time since capture, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe the rest of her life would not be built from fear. But the mind of a prisoner is trained to expect change, and the war had taught her that kindness could vanish without warning. She told herself not to trust it, not yet. Still, as the camp lights flickered off and the wind sighed across the prairie, Anna heard the distant whinny of horses and the faint laughter of men who rode under stars instead of searchlights. She pressed her forehead to the window pane, the glass cool against her skin, and thought, maybe freedom isn't a country. Maybe it's a kind of heart. Outside, the cowboys were finishing their rounds, silhouettes moving slowly against the horizon. The sky was a sweep of indigo, wide enough to hold every silence she'd ever known. Tomorrow they would start work in earnest, riding lessons, the Americans called it. The idea seemed impossible. Prisoners on horseback. But in Texas, impossibilities had a way of looking ordinary. Anna closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Real cowboys." And in that whisper was the smallest spark of belief that she was seeing a world built not from orders or victory, but from something rarer. Decency. The next morning rose with a copper light that painted the plains in bronze. A thin fog clung to the grass, and the smell of coffee drifted from the cookhouse. The camp had a strange rhythm now, half prison, half ranch. Metal spoons clattered, boots crunched on gravel, and the women's voices mixed with the low murmurs of the cowboys already preparing the horses. Anna stepped outside her cabin, blinking against the sunlight. Her uniform, washed and sun-dried by the wind, smelled faintly of soap and dust. She wasn't used to clean clothes anymore, not after the stench of salt air, iron and confinement that had clung to her since capture. Lotta called out behind her, "They said today we learned to ride." Her voice was caught somewhere between dread and wonder. Anna smiled faintly. "I think that's what prisoners do in Texas." They joined the others near the corral, where the air shimmered with the heat already building. Tom Whitaker stood by the fence, coiling his rope lazily. A few of the younger cowboys leaned against the rails, chewing straw and trying not to stare at the foreign women who were still half ghosts from a lost war. The translator, a thin man from Kansas, shouted over the hum of the wind, "You'll be paired with one of the ranchers. They'll teach you how to sit the saddle." "Sit the saddle," Lotta muttered in German, "as if we're girls at a Sunday picnic." Anna tried not to laugh. But when Tom lifted a boot and swung into the saddle, the ease of it made the laughter die in her throat. The horse responded to him like an old friend. She'd seen German officers mount parade horses with ceremony and force. This was different, gentle, precise, without pride. Tom turned his mount toward the women. "All right, ladies," he called. "Don't worry, none of these fellas bite, least not the horses." The translator fumbled to repeat it, and a few of the women laughed nervously. Anna didn't understand every word, but she caught the tone. Warm, teasing. Tom pointed at her. "You first, ma'am. You look steady." For a second, the world seemed to tilt. The other women murmured encouragement. Anna stepped forward, heart pounding as he held out his hand. His palm was rough with calluses, his skin tanned and warm. "Foot here," he said, nodding to the stirrup. "Don't rush, horse'll feel your nerves." She obeyed. The leather creaked as she put her foot in place, her hands trembling. He guided her with patient, steady movements, nothing invasive, nothing hurried. When she finally swung into the saddle, the animal shifted beneath her, alive and massive. She froze. "Easy," Tom said softly. "He won't throw you." The horse's mane brushed her knees. The smell of dust and hide filled her nose. For a moment she forgot she was a prisoner at all. The fence disappeared, the sky expanded, and she could hear only the slow rhythm of breathing, hers and the horse's, merging. Tom circled her, his hat shadowing his face. "Not bad," he said. "Now hold the reins loose. You tell him where to go, not force him." When she moved, the horse moved. A jolt of fear ran through her body, then faded into something unexpected. Thrill. The camp's boundaries blurred. Beyond them stretched the entire American horizon, open and cruel and free. Lotta shouted from the fence, "Anna, you look like a movie star!" Anna laughed, an actual laugh, not a hollow imitation. It startled her. She hadn't remembered the sound of her own laughter in years. By noon, the sun blazed overhead. Sweat ran down their backs, but no one complained. Even the guards, ranchers in name only, looked impressed. The women, once stiff and terrified, were learning to ride. During the break, Tom leaned against a post beside her. He handed her a tin cup of water. "You got balance," he said. "Most folks tense up. You don't." "I am always tense," she said quietly. He chuckled. "Could have fooled me." Their eyes met briefly, just long enough for her to see that he didn't look at her like an enemy, or a trophy, or a danger. He looked at her like a person. Later that afternoon, a thunderstorm built on the horizon. The sky darkened to iron grey. The women hurried to gather tools, but the wind moved faster. Lightning slashed across the plains. The horses screamed and kicked in their pens. Tom barked orders. "Get those gates closed!" Anna ran to help without thinking. The wind ripped her hair loose. Rain stung her face. When a gate latch jammed, she struggled against it until Tom appeared beside her, wrenching it shut. The noise of thunder was deafening. "You all right?" he shouted. She nodded, breathless. He grinned, rain running down his face. First storm's always the wildest. When it was over, the air smelled of wet dirt and ozone. The women stumbled back to the cabins, soaked and shaking, but laughing. The Texans slapped each other's backs, lighting cigarettes as if the storm had been nothing more than a stubborn horse. That night, after lights out, Anna lay awake listening to the soft hiss of rain on the roof. She thought about the way Tom had smiled at the storm, without fear, without rage. The war had taught her that men conquered things. But here, men worked with them, the land, the weather, the animals. In the dim light, she whispered to Lotta, "They aren't like us." Lotta turned toward her bunk. "You mean they're not soldiers?" "No," Anna said. "They are free men. Even their kindness is free." Lotta was silent for a long moment. "Maybe that's what peace looks like." Anna closed her eyes. She wanted to believe it, but she knew peace was fragile. Every kindness she'd seen during the war had ended in orders shouted in another language. Still, something in her was shifting, like dry earth after rain. The next day, one of the horses fell ill. The Cowboys worked to cool it down, bringing water and shade. Anna, still trained as a nurse, stepped forward instinctively. She felt its tremblings. Flank, its hot breath. "Fever," she said. "He needs rest." Tom looked at her. "You sure know your way around patients." "I was a nurse," she said. "Then this fella's lucky," he replied, squatting beside her. They stayed by the animal most of the day. When it finally calmed, Tom handed her his handkerchief. You did good. Anna looked at the cloth, coarse and sweat-stained, and held it like something precious. For the first time, she didn't feel like a captive tending to someone else's command. She felt needed. As the sun set, painting the sky in crimson, she watched the Cowboys ride out again. Their silhouettes looked carved into the horizon, eternal and untamed. The horses moved as if carrying the weight of an entire country's freedom. And she thought, maybe that's why they ride, to remember what they never lost. Her fingers tightened around the handkerchief. Somewhere deep inside, the last fragments of war, fear, obedience, suspicion, began to dissolve into the Texas dust. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new lessons. But tonight, as thunder rumbled far off and the scent of rain lingered in the air, she let herself believe that she was learning something even rarer than survival. She was learning how to live again. The last weeks of summer came on like a final, generous breath. The floodplains greened after the storm, and the air, though still hot, tasted cleaner, rinsed. The camp moved in its easy rhythm. Boots on packed earth at dawn, coffee steaming in tin cups, horses stamping, saddles creaking, laughter simmering low like a hymn. The women felt it in their bones. They had stepped out of the tension of war and into a tempo older than uniforms. It wasn't freedom, not exactly. It was the rehearsal for it. On a clear morning, Tom Whitaker led the women to the south pasture where the grass rolled toward a horizon so wide you could pour your worries into it and never see them again. A string of horses bobbed their heads at the rail. The sky above them was a flawless enamel bowl. "Ladies," Tom said, swinging down from his saddle, "today ain't about riding around in circles. Today you and your mounts are going to do a little work." The translator repeated it, and nervous laughter ran through the group. Work meant purpose. Purpose was something the war had almost taken from them. Anna adjusted her hat, borrowed, sun-bleached, brim gone soft, and tightened the cinch with a tug that felt sure. They were pushing cattle that day, guiding a slow river of muscle toward a new field. It looked simple until the animals tested them, drifting where they pleased. Anna kept her mare at a steady walk, hand light on the reins. She listened to Tom's calls, to the whistles from the other men, to the unspoken language of a herd that accepted pressure but spooked at force. When one longhorn broke left, she leaned, legs talking to the mare, and the horse came alive beneath her, matching the steer step for step. They turned him with patience rather than panic. "Atta girl!" Tom called, not loud, just enough for the praise to reach her like heat. She didn't blush. She worked. By noon, their faces were striped wows, with dust. The cattle grazed in a new square of pasture. A breeze stirred and lifted the edges of the world. Tom rode up beside Anna and tilted his canteen. "You're making a habit of not being terrible," he said, deadpan. "I hope it is a habit that can stay," Anna answered, lips dry but smiling. Her English had loosened, the words no longer bumping into each other like strangers on a train. He grinned. "Reckon it can." They shared the silence of two people who didn't need to fill it. Anna glanced at his hands, nicked, rope-burned, competent. Hands that knew how to grip a rein and let go. She thought of hands that had not let go, not in Europe, not when it mattered. Then she pushed the thought away like a door she would close and never reopen. That evening, light spilled over the corral like honey. Someone tuned a battered guitar. Someone else set a shoe to a horse's hoof and hammered the nails home in a shower of sparks. Lotta found a way to boil coffee so strong it tasted like courage. The Cowboys offered the women a turn at roping a dummy calf, burlap stuffed and horned with sticks. Most of the women failed spectacularly and fell into helpless laughter. The men clapped anyway. When Anna's loop finally dropped over the horns, there was a soft cheer, the kind that says we were all waiting for you to win, and now you've done it, and the day is complete. Tom tossed her a red bandana. "For luck," he said, casual. She was not used to gifts that didn't come with a weight attached. She pressed the cotton to her cheek and said, "Danke," then corrected, "Thank you." That night, the first cold edge of autumn slipped beneath the door and tapped every sleeping shoulder. The stars were so bright it hurt to look at them. The plane didn't feel empty. It felt crowded with things you usually couldn't hear: the turning of the earth, the creep of dew, the breath of horse lungs at rest. 2 days later, the letter came. It was delivered by an army truck that coughed dust into the sky and parked by the mess hall. The officer inside, a young man with an earnest face and polished boots, unfolded papers and cleared his throat as the women gathered. The translator stood to the side, already pale. "By order of the Department of War," the officer read, "prisoners of war detained at Hereford Camp, Female Auxiliary Unit, are scheduled for repatriation." He listed dates, routes, handoff procedures. Words like embarkation and transport and return to homeland fell like stones into a shallow pond. For a moment, no one blinked. Then the surface broke. Lotta gripped Anna's arm. "Heim," she whispered, as if the word were a wallpaper pattern from childhood. Home. But the syllable tasted strange. Home was not a place you could guarantee. Home could be rubble and hunger and a name crossed out on a census. Home was a photograph you kept in a pocket through 3 searches because you knew if they found it, you'd have nothing left to warm your hands on in winter. Tom stood apart from the cluster of cowboys, hat in hand, head bowed, as if the officer were reading a list of the dead. When the bulletin ended, the men nodded, some scratched their chins, one spat and said, "Well," to no one. The truck drove away in a cloud that took a long time to settle. Life did not stop. Horses still needed water, leather still cracked in the sun and begged oil. But something had shifted between all of them. Every kindness now had a clock attached. Every look had an afterward. Next morning, Anna found a folded sheet of paper tucked beneath her plate in the mess hall. The handwriting was careful. Block letters. "If you'd like, I can show you the creek before you go. It runs clear after the big storms. TWW." She swallowed a smile into her coffee and folded the note into her sleeve. They rode out in the late afternoon when the light had the color of ripe wheat. They took the slow trail through mesquite and wild sunflowers, the scent of them tangy and green. Tom kept his horse close to hers, not crowding her, letting conversation arrive when it wanted. "Repatriation," he said finally. "Hell of a word." "It is a long word for leave," Anna said. "Sometimes leaving is just walking to the next ridge," he offered. "And sometimes it is crossing an ocean with nothing in your pockets but ghosts," she said, not unkindly. They came to the creek. It braided around smooth stones, the water the color of bottle glass, cold as a promise. Cottonwoods leaned close as if to listen. They dismounted and sat on the bank, boots in the damp, hats tilted back. Tom picked up a flat stone and skimmed it. It jumped 3 times, bright coins on a table, then sank. "You got people waiting back home?" he asked. "There was a brother," she said, feeling the past like a bruise she could touch now without wincing. "He did not come back from the east. A mother who worried. She will still be worrying, I think, because if she stops, she must count." She shrugged. "And you?" "My old man's got a patch of scrub north of Amarillo and a stubborn view of God," Tom said. "I got a sister meaner than a wet cat if you touch her pies before Sunday dinner." He smiled. "Not much, except the kind of much you only know you have when it's gone." They listened to the creek saying what water always says, "Keep moving." The wind braided their silence into something that felt like friendship. Not romance. They had not earned that word. It would have cheapened this. Friendship was more honest. It was 2 people who had carried different kinds of war putting them, down beside each other and not being ashamed of the sound. On the last week, the camp hosted a small rodeo, mostly for themselves. Someone scrawled Hereford Fair on a plank and nailed it crooked to the gate. The women lined the rails, faces bright, hair tied back with borrowed ribbons. The cowboys showed off just enough to make fun of themselves. Gentle broncs, barrels knocked over on purpose, a competitive egg and spoon race that had everyone doubled over. Lotta entered a slow walk contest and, to shrieking applause, beat 2 men by refusing to be hurried by creatures who knew only one speed. At the end, Tom rode into the ring with a bundle on his saddle horn. He dismounted and walked to the women, hat off. "We got some parting gifts," he said, voice rough. He handed out small things, a bandana, a lucky horseshoe, a folded photograph of the corral at sunset, a book of pressed wildflowers. To Anna he gave a glove, one of his, right-handed, broken in along the knuckles. "It'll be too big," she said, almost laughing at the tenderness of it. "You'll grow into it," he said, and they both heard the joke, hiding the truth. The night before departure, sleep was the one thing camp could not supply. The cabins glowed dim. The corral clinked with a sound like silver wind bells. Anna packed what little she had, the bandana, the glove, the note with block letters, a smooth stone from the creek, the memory of laughter that had never demanded anything in exchange. She stepped outside. Tom was leaning on the fence, looking as if the sky had sat him down, and told him to listen until it finished. "You could have kept the glove," she said, coming to stand beside him. "I kept the left," he said, lifting his hand. "Half a pair ain't much use, but it's still a pair." The stars weren't scattered that night. They were arranged. It was the kind of sky that made you understand why sailors trust it. "Do you think it will be very bad?" she asked, "when we go back?" Tom didn't answer the question she asked. He answered the one under it. "I think you'll take this place with you," he said. "And if there's a day when it feels like the dark got bigger, you hold that rope." "Rope?" He nodded toward the corral. "We've been teaching you to ride like it's about saddles and spurs. It ain't. It's about the hand. You don't yank a good horse, you don't beg a bad one. You hold steady because that tells both of you who you are. That's your rope." Anna laughed softly. "You are a poet, Tom Whitaker." "Lord, don't tell the fellas," he said, smiling. She wanted to say more, something worthy of the months and the miles, and the way Texas had crept under her skin like permanent ink. But words are blunt tools for hearts that have learned to be quiet. So she did what cowboys taught her. She kept her hand steady and let the moment walk with her. Morning was clean and cool. The women lined up with their satchels. The army truck waited, sullen with authority. Horses watched over the rails with soft, uncomprehending eyes. The cowboys had dressed like it was Sunday, shirts tucked, hats brushed, boots polished with the heel of a palm. Lotta went first, hugging every man she could reach, weeping without shame. "You ridiculous angels," she said, mixing languages, and nobody corrected her. Others followed, shy waves, quick handshakes, a promise from a woman who swore in 3 tongues never to forget the taste of cornbread. When it was Anna's turn, she stood facing Tom and did not try to memorize him. She already knew she couldn't forget. He put his hand out like a man shaking on a fair deal. She took it. "Ride easy," he said. "I will hold the rope," she answered. He tapped his hat brim and stepped back. That was his gift too, the discipline not to make leaving harder than it had to be. The tuk rattled away, camp shrinking to a smudge, then a stamp, then nothing. The women sat on benches, hands folded around the new weight of their small treasures. Dust billowed and then fell behind them like a curtain. No one spoke for a long time. The road ran straight as a rule. At a crossroads, the truck slowed to let a small herd cross. A boy on a pony waved his hat at them, gap-toothed grin wide enough to split the morning. The women waved back as if they were queens. "Do you think they will remember us?" Lotta asked. Anna looked at the boy, at the fence line, at the sky vast enough to be patient with human mistakes. "They will remember somebody," she said. And that will be enough. The train waited at a station that looked less like a building than a shade put there by mercy. The platform boards were bleached and kind. An old woman sold lemonade in wax paper cups. The officer checked his list as if lists saved souls. The women boarded. Windows clapped shut. Steam sighed. As the cars lurched forward, the plane spilled past in a long scroll, a book you couldn't finish. The train gathered itself, and the horizon obliged by widening. The camp fell behind, but the country did not. Its air still in their hair, its dust still in their shoes, its idea still in their hands. Hold steady. When the sun climbed to its throne, the women dozed. Anna did not. She took the red bandana from her pocket and tied it around her wrist. She slipped on the right-hand glove and spread her fingers inside it. It was too big. That was fine. She closed her eyes and saw the creek. She saw Tom skipping stones. She saw the mare's ear flick to catch her breath. She saw the men moving as if the land had decided to wear them for a while, like a favourite jacket. She saw a younger self in a burned city looking toward a blank future and flinching. Then she saw the self who had learned to sit a saddle and breathe with the animal and choose, however small the choice, not to yank. The track clacked its steady sermon. The fields unspooled. A hawk hung in air like a coin nobody had the heart to spend. In the months and years to come, people would ask the women what America had been like. Some would speak of food, how it arrived warm and often. Some would mention boots or songs, or the way a man could say "ma'am" and make it sound like a roof you could sleep under. Anna would touch her wrist where the bandana lived and say, "They ride." Her questioner would frown. "Horses? We had those. What is different?" "They ride," Anna would repeat, without needing to prove anything to the horse. Maybe that is what peace is, knowing who you are and not using it to bruise the world. And sometimes, at night, turning a page by lamplight in a small apartment far from Texas, she would think of a ranch hand standing under a sky shaped like forever, saying, "Ride easy," and she would whisper back, miles and languages away, "I will hold the rope." Texas went with them. Not the fences or the cabins or the mess hall. The habit of steadiness, the habit of gentleness, the habit of being ready to help when a gate stuck in a storm, even if no one had told you to, the habit of calling a stranger ma'am and meaning it. At ports and in boats, through customs and questions, the war would try to claim them again by asking what side they had been on, the way a tide asks a pebble to remember the wave that once held it. Anna would answer the necessary things and keep the rest in the pocket where the glove warmed to her skin. Years later, a letter would cross an ocean, addressed in careful block letters, bearing a stamp with a stampede of stars. It would say little, ranchers are stingy with words, but it would carry a photograph of a creek and a boot print at its edge and a shadow like a hat brim at the corner. On the back, an inscription. "The water's still clear after storms," signed T.W. Anna would take it to the window. She would hold it up so the light fell through the paper the way it had once fallen through dust in the corral. She would breathe. Then she would tie the bandana tighter and step into a day she had not earned but had chosen to live.